So we'll make a start to the program. Once you have picked up something to eat or drink, and once you have taken your seats, we'll make a start. Now, just as everyone's taking their seats, and in terms of housekeeping, just to again remind everyone that we are live streaming this session on the Transparency International PNG Facebook page. So just for you to be aware of that. We'll start the formalities. And again, thank you everyone for your attendance. On behalf of Transparency International PNG, I welcome you all to this afternoon's Roundtable Dialogue. This afternoon, we are commemorating the International Anti-Corruption Day, which has a focus on youth. And for PNG specifically, we wanted to use this as an opportunity to also have our young people engage on the discussions around elections, but also have the PNG Electoral Commission as well as the National Youth Development Authority also be able to present what their plans are moving forward into 2025. So I should start by first introducing myself. My name is Ariane, and I work for Transparency International PNG. I lead the team at TIPNG, and we are honored to have all of our roundtable participants with us this afternoon, as well as our main speakers that will be responding to the dialogue this afternoon. On my right, I have Mr. John Kalamoro, Deputy Electoral Commissioner, PNG Electoral Commission, and on my left, I have David Lawrence, who is the Principal Advisor for International Relations with the National Youth Development Authority. Also, we acknowledge the partners that are in the room today. Acknowledge the presence of the European Union delegation to Papua New Guinea, represented here today by Dr. Hans Lambert. We also acknowledge the presence of the UNDP Deputy Resident Representative of PNG, Mr. Adil Mansour. We acknowledge the presence of Dr. Alma Sedla, who is the technical advisor for the TAP project that's under the UNDP and who's been a big supporter of the work as well. And we acknowledge the presence of Tessa Placken, Councillor Law and Justice with the Australian High Commission, and of course her two colleagues that have joined us here this afternoon, and especially with Sam Curtis, who we work closely with the Australian High Commission. So again, I thank you all for your attendance. We have key partners in the room as well, from Mrs. Margaret Vagi from the PNG Electoral Commission as well. I want to acknowledge your presence. The President of the Media Council of PNG, Mr. Neville Choi. We have Deanne Allen from ICAC as well. We thank Deanne for joining us this afternoon. And of course, all of our development partners and donors that are in the room here today. Thank you again for your presence. I must acknowledge the two directors of the TIPNG board that are in the room, Ms. Michelle Haofa and Ms. Mary Udu. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. So again, welcome to this afternoon's dialogue, and we will start by hearing some opening remarks from our invited guests. And I will first call upon Mr. Adil Mansour to provide his opening remarks to this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So first, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. John Kalamoro, Deputy Election Commissioner, Mr. David Lawrence, National Youth Development Authority, Mr. Hans Lambrecht, European Union Head of Development Cooperation in Papua New Guinea, Ms. Ariana Kessman, CEO of Transparency International PNG, the hosts of today's event, Tessa Prokhan, sorry if I'm not pronouncing the names correctly, Councillor Law and Justice from the Australian High Commission, and other officials and participants of this afternoon session. A very warm good afternoon to everybody. On today, 9th of December each year, the global community marks International Anti-Corruption Day, which is a reminder of the ongoing battle against corruption and the importance of collective action to combat it. Since the adoption of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in 2003, this day has become a beacon for raising awareness and inspiring efforts to build societies free from corruption's grip. This year's theme, Uniting with Youth Against Corruption, Shaping Tomorrow's Integrity, highlights the pivotal role young people play in championing transparency and accountability. The focus on youth is a deliberate acknowledgement of their potential to transform governance and uphold the values of integrity. Looking ahead to the 11th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption in 2025, youth will have an unparalleled opportunity to voice their appeals directly to global leaders. This reflects the international community's recognition of the vital contributions young people make to shaping policies and fostering sustainable change. I'd like to refer to a recent UNDP report, Enhancing Youth Political Participation throughout the electoral cycle. The participation of young people in political and decision-making processes is shaped by various political, social, and cultural factors. Too often, social norms perpetuate barriers, particularly for young women, hindering their ability to engage in governance. Yet, whether through formal institutions like parliaments or informal civic movements, youth participation is essential for a vibrant, resilient democracy. Despite their numbers, young people remain underrepresented in formal political leadership roles. Globally, those under 35 rarely occupy key decision-making roles, and this disparity is even more pronounced for young women. Addressing these gaps is critical to ensuring that governance reflects the diversity and aspirations of all citizens, men, women, persons with disabilities, and youth. Here in Papua New Guinea, the UNDP remains committed to supporting youth as agents of change. Through the EU-funded Transparency and Accountability Program in Papua New Guinea, we're fostering youth participation in governance and promoting a culture of integrity, transparency, and accountability. Recently, together with the United Nations Population Fund, we organized the 4th National Youth Mock Parliament, which provided young people from across the country first-hand experience with democratic processes, transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership. That was a very successful collaboration that we had with the National Parliament. Similarly, the Transparency International PNG's Mike Manning Youth Democracy Camp, supported through the same EU program, has empowered young participants to advocate for transparency and inclusivity. These platforms not only enhance youth's understanding, but also inspire action. The future of Papua New Guinea lies with its youth. You have the energy, creativity, and determination to lead this nation toward a brighter, more accountable future. Together, let us champion integrity, rebuild trust, and ensure a legacy of good governance for generations to come. So I wish the organizers thank you for organizing this, and wish you all the best for a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Adil. I would now like to welcome the Head of Development Cooperation for the European Union Delegation, Dr. Hans Lambrecht, to give his opening remarks as well.
Good afternoon. In terms of protocol, I first would like to welcome all the young representatives that will participate in the roundtable this afternoon. And also, of course, the representatives from government and civil society. Let me just acknowledge, of course, Mr. Adil Mansour. Thank you for your good remarks to open this event. Mr. John Kalamura, the Deputy Election Commissioner, Ms. Ariana Kasman, representative of the National Youth Development Authority, Mr. Lawrence, and then the colleague of the Australian High Commission, Tessa Plukhaan, if I voilà, so my basic knowledge of German helps to pronounce her name well, so because I don't think that happens too often in PNG, so voilà. So I'm actually very grateful to speak after Mr. Mansour, because on the substance, why this roundtable is important, why celebrating Anti-Corruption Day is important, he explained it very well. So I'm not going to repeat it, because we need to leave sufficient space for you to discuss. Maybe just to tell why we're happy as EU to support this event. Of course, we do this through the project with UNDP, where we collaborate on transparency and accountability, which are core values for us as the European Union, and core values that we also share with PNG and the collaborators here we have around the table. So that's why it's essential to support such an event. Secondly, because it's about young people. I think Mr. Mansour also mentioned the young population in PNG is huge. So within a couple of years, you're the ones that will be behind the steering wheel and behind the buttons of the country. So working with you and discussing with you on values like this is essential. Just to give an example, for the EU, we have a commissioner that's dealing with international partnerships and youth. And you may recall sometime you have this Pacific Island Forum leaders meeting. So there was one in August. And also a young representative from PNG went there to enter into dialogue with the politicians, with all the leaders of the Pacific. So this is really the type of issues we want to support. And that's also why we're here today. And I'm just stopping here to give maximum space for your discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And of course, to end off our opening remarks, one of our key partners in the work that we've done as an organization over many years, I think from the start of Transparency International PNG, I welcome Tessa from the Australian High Commission.
Kupala avinun tru olgeta. First, I also want to acknowledge all the fantastic young leaders and representatives from organisations here in PNG, as well as the distinguished members of PNG government, TIPNG, and our representatives here from the EU and the UN. It's fantastic to be here this afternoon and be able to speak to you all today. I just think it's amazing that you've all gathered here today on International Anti-Corruption Day to have this very important discussion and use this as an opportunity to bring some fantastic minds together. And I hope I've got this right. I have this on good authority from talking to a colleague this morning that there's a saying in PNG that a single bamboo pole cannot support a foundation of a house, that it takes many poles together to create a strong foundation. And I think today, as you all gather here to discuss corruption and the future of democracy in PNG, I think that this wisdom is more relevant now than ever, that everyone has a role to play in building and shaping the kind of future that you want for your own country or any country that we're involved in. And as I look around here and I see all the faces at the table here, I see the future of Papua New Guinea. I see young leaders, creative minds, and enthusiastic change makers. And I think each of you represents a bamboo pole in the foundation of your nation's future. And let me be clear from the start, as today is World Anti-Corruption Day, that corruption is a global challenge. In our own country, in Australia, we are absolutely not perfect. Many of you might have seen from our journey with the creation of our own National Anti-Corruption Commission that we are also committed to greater transparency and accountability in government. PNG is absolutely not alone in this fact. Other countries such as, United Kingdom, United States, countries across the world, we all face our own corruption challenges, and they're all unique to our own different contexts that we operate in and need their own grassroots solutions. So no nation is immune. But what matters is how people respond to these challenges and how you engage young people in creating change. I think it's important to think about how you raise the next generation to view their country, interact with their own government, and how you believe in the power of your own voice. And here's what I think makes today different and this roundtable different, is that I understand and I can imagine that you're not just here to simply complain about the problem of corruption. You're here to talk about what you all can do about it together. You're likely here because 2027 is approaching. It's your next national general election and is coming, and it's on the horizon, and you want to participate in your own democracy and the future of your country. So let's think about today as a bit of a call to action. And some people might ask, what can young people do? Well, let me tell you what I think is possible. Young people can become election observers to improve transparency in the democratic process. You can use social media and technology to spread the word and prompt discussion about political issues that you care about amongst your own communities. And you can also educate your communities about your voting rights. So when I look at some of the organisations here who are represented today, such as The Voice and the Young Professional Women's Network, I can see how young people in PNG are already leading the way. And when I witness the work of the PNG Assembly of Disabled Persons, I'm also reminded, as we all should be, that discussions about your country have to include everyone's voice. And to those who might say that the youth are too young to understand politics, I say that you're exactly the right age to engage in your own society and think about your future. You understand technology better than any generation before you, you're more connected, and you're more determined to build a better future. So as you sit here today, halfway to the 2027 elections, this is a unique opportunity. The PNG Electoral Commission and the National Youth Development Authority, everyone's here to listen to all the experiences and ideas. And this isn't just talk, it's about shaping future approaches and engagement. Each of you here today represents thousands more Papua New Guineans who share your dreams of engaging in the political process. Whether you're from Port Moresby or perhaps the remotest village, or whether you're a student or a young professional, your voice absolutely matters. So as you move forward with your discussions today, which I very much look forward to listening to and feel very honoured to be able to observe, I challenge each of you to think beyond just talking about your observations, but thinking about identifying solutions, think about commitments, and think about the role you can play in encouraging your friends and your communities to engage in the political process. I'm also very proud and excited to say that our support today comes also with further ideas for support and how we can engage with you. Some of you may know that Australia recently launched the Community Justice Fund, which is a new grant fund under our Law and Justice program. And through the Community Justice Fund, we are backing local solutions to local challenges. This fund is designed to provide direct support to PNG-led organisations, grassroots initiatives in PNG's communities, for those people who are seeking to build safer, more just and more transparent communities. You could be working on a range of issues. It could be about gender-based violence, about SARV, access to justice. Also, corruption is one of our pillar issues as part of our justice program. And whether you are a small organisation and you're just starting out and you want to test some new ideas, or whether you've got some established initiatives but you could use some extra support to perhaps expand your activities or build it into something bigger, the Community Justice Fund has different tiers of funding available to you depending on your circumstances and what it is that you would like to engage with us on. So I just wanted to throw that out there because many of the organisations represented here today could be eligible for this funding. So I encourage you to speak to a member of my team over there, Sam Curtis. He's got some information sheets about the Community Justice Fund, or reach out to us at the Australian High Commission. We're here to help. So I just want to wrap up. So remember that corruption isn't just about money disappearing, it's about opportunities disappearing or voices not being heard. But But together, like those bamboo poles supporting a house, you can build something stronger. You can build a Papua New Guinea where integrity isn't just a word, but it's a way of life. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic discussion, and I look forward to chatting with you all later. Bye.
Thank you so much, Tessa. I think that was an excellent way to end the opening session, opening remarks from our invited guests. And I think a lot of challenges also shared about what we all can do around this table. To start off the conversation, I just want to remind everyone in this room that as of December this month, we are at the halfway mark from the last 2022 elections and the halfway mark to the next 2027 elections. And so it is a point of reflection for us as a country, for us as a nation, to think about what has been done to address some of the issues, challenges that we faced in 2022. And what we can do with 2.5 years left. And so this conversation is an important one to have. I will start off by first outlining TIPNG's three main issues or three main areas that we have highlighted across all of our work, starting with the release of our elections observation report in November 2022, and of course at discussions we've had in several forums around electoral reform. The main 3 points that we have been advocating for and are pushing for: the first, looking at the leadership of the Electoral Commission, looking at 3 to 5 member commission, so that decision making can be shared, so that decision making can be discussed, deliberated on, and delivered. So that's the first key ask for TIPNG. The second is around improvements to the the electoral role that we have. We want to ensure that there is greater role transparency. So if that means putting the role online so that people have access to it, we want to make sure that people are able to check that their names are on the roll, and if they need to move electorates because they've moved from, say, Gerehu to Kira, that change can be done easily as well. And lastly, we want to also make sure that there is always an annual budget set aside for the PNG Electoral Commission to be able to carry out its mandated function. We all know that in anything that we do, we need resources, and financial support, financial assistance is key to that. So our third ask that we have maintained over time is to ensure that there is sufficient budget allocation provided to the PNG Electoral Commission to be able to carry out their work. The elections, the organizing of the elections cannot be left 6 months before an election. The work immediately starts after the last election, and so there must be consistent funding provided to the Electoral Commission. And those have really been the key 3 things that TIPNG has focused on in the last 2.5 years, and where we've ensured in every meeting that we've had, in any engagement that we've had, those 3 key asks are explained. We make sure that that's clear to all of our partners. Of course, there are many issues with the elections, and there are many avenues to discuss these different issues on the elections. But these are the main 3 that we are focused on as TIPNG as we lead to the next 2027 elections. Now, of course, today is about International Anti-Corruption Day, and there is a focus on young people and how young people contribute to shaping the integrity. And I think a lot of those points that were in my mind, Tessa alluded to, so I will not repeat. But this dialogue is an opportunity for all of us around the table to share your views of the organization that you represent here today. Of course, we could not have everyone here, but we have 12 organizations that we will hear from today. We do have apologies from the Voice Inc. and the PNG Council of Churches, but I think we have a lot of strong voices around the table, and this is really an opportunity for you all. Again, once each of you have spoken and have provided your views on the 2 points that we provided ahead of this dialogue, we will listen to the remarks or response from the PNG Electoral Commission, followed by remarks from the National Youth Development Authority. So again, for those that are joining us, we have 2 points that we'll be asking our dialogue participants to respond to. And the first one is what have been their experiences with elections in PNG. And second, where they would like to see the PNG Electoral Commission do more to make young people empowered during the elections. And when we talk about empowerment, or when I talk about empowerment in a lot of the work that I do, I talk about the power that you give to someone else. That's true empowerment. It's not power that you gain from teaching someone something. You give your power to someone else, and that empowers them to go on and do greater things. So today, we will hear from 10 of the organizations around the table. As you know, due to time limitations, we have allocated a set time for each of you to speak, but please feel free to start with an introduction of yourself and your organization before you give your remarks. Again, thank you to everyone that's joined us here in the room, and of course those who have joined us online. And we will start our dialogue, starting on my left with Mr. Charlie Hulijeli, who is the president of the Young Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Good afternoon, everyone. Testing if my mic's working, because only the front people said good afternoon to me, so good afternoon, everyone. All right. Thank you, first of all, to Transparency International for organizing this session with youths. A lot of times, there's a lot of important things that get discussed that youths overlooked. Maybe it's because we're youths and people tend to think that we're young with a younger generation and our voices don't matter. So I do appreciate it that Transparency International has taken this opportunity to invite us to talk on such a very important topic. To introduce myself again, I'm Charlie Hulijeli, the current president of Young Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'd also like to acknowledge the other youth participants from a wide variety of organizations, invited guests, and partners in the room today. Thank you all for being here. So let me start off. There were 2 talking points, discussion points that was given to us. The first one was, what has been your experience with elections in PNG? Before I start, I'd like to mention as a sort of disclaimer, and also giving credit back to my members as well. This was, when I was sent these questions, I put it out to the wider organization. So whatever I say today, it's a collaboration, or it's a collective view. So the responses I got, and I tried to compile them or compress them into short paragraphs. Okay, so to start things off, what has been your experience with elections in PNG? The electoral process is deeply affected by the broader political economy of the country, which has significant implications on the quality and integrity of our elections, as we all know. The quality of elections in PNG has often been called into question. Youth observers, or those who have gone for the elections, taken part in the voting, have noted that the 2017 and more recently the 2022 national elections were particularly problematic, with many asserting that they were much worse than previous elections. Issues such as the manipulation of polling processes, counting irregularities, and the declaration of winners without a transparent counting process have raised concerns about our adherence to electoral laws and guidelines. Despite our very good legal frameworks in place, the implementation has frequently been undermined by personal interests and power dynamics amongst influential figures. So that's my opening remarks on what has been our experience with elections in PNG. Now, of course, we can go through all the little things that have gone wrong with our election, but I'd rather focus on the positive. What, as youths, what can we do to improve the situation? So, which leads me to the second question: empowering young people during elections. What are some recommendations? Number one, enhance voter education programs. The PNG Electoral Commission and partners should prioritize the development and implementation of voter education programs specifically targeting young people. This can be achieved through interactive workshops, seminars, and online platforms that explain the voting process and the importance of civic engagement and how elections impact their lives. Number two, youth participation in electoral processes. To empower young voters, the PNG EC should create opportunities for youth involvement in electoral processes beyond just voting. This could include establishing a youth advisory council on elections that allow young people to voice their opinions on electoral reforms and policies affecting them. So we're not just putting our opinions and recommendations, but we also see them through to its implementation. Additionally, encouraging participation in election monitoring and observation roles can be provided and foster a sense of responsibility amongst our young citizens. Number three, accessible registration processes. The registration process is often a barrier for young voters. The PNG EC and partners and stakeholders should streamline voter registration by implementing mobile registration units that visit schools, universities, and community centers, and other civil organizations as well. For example, it should be mandatory for Electoral Commission to visit all grade 10 and grade 12 after the exams to talk on the importance of voting and go get those students that have reached the eligible age of voting to register on the common roll. Number four, leveraging technology, and this was alluded to in one of the opening remarks. Incorporating technology into the electoral process can greatly enhance engagement among younger voters who are digitally advanced. The PNG EC should or could develop applications that provide information about candidates, polling locations, and real-time updates during elections. There should be online registration options, should also expand and make it easier for youth to register from their devices, whether it's on mobile phones or personal computers. Because right now, as we all know, we're a technologically advanced generation compared to our previous generations, our fathers, our grandparents. So I really do think that leveraging technology is very important to involve the youths. Utilizing social media channels is popular amongst youths nowadays, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok, can help disseminate information effectively. Engaging local influencers or youth leaders to promote these educational initiatives can also enhance outreach. Number five, collaborating with education, institute, NGOs, and community-based organizations. Building partnership with schools and universities is crucial for fostering an informed youth population. The PNG EC should work with educational institutions and NGOs to integrate civic education into the curricula at all levels, ensuring that students understand their rights and responsibilities as voters before they reach voting age. By focusing on these areas, the PNG Electoral Commission can significantly empower young people during elections in PNG. To conclude, the elections of our leaders is a cornerstone of democracy. Getting our youths more involved in this process is the only way we ensure the voices of our future generations are heard. Thank you all.
Thank you, Charlie. I think you pointed out a very key, important exercise that you did, and that was consultation with your members and ensuring that you had the collective view of your membership. So thank you so much for sharing on behalf of the Young Port Moresby Chamber of Commerce. We'll move to Joseph Gombo, who is the coordinator of Street Smart Initiative.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank Transparency International, PNG, for the opportunity given to Street Smart Initiative. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Electoral Commission with Deputy Commissioner thank you, Strat Bosman Yukam. Also, I'd like to thank the CEO and David Lawrence also. I'd like to acknowledge also the partners and the observers who have come here today, and also to fellow participants. Thank you very much. I'd like to also acknowledge Adrai Namona, the traditional indigenous people of Port Moresby, the Motukoitabuans. Thank you, Badar. Thank you for your attendance also. I'd like to firstly, this is a breakdown from, because Street Smart is basically, we look at youths from urban and also rural areas. So this is just a breakdown of the International Anti-Corruption Day, the questions. I'll just give a breakdown on that. Okay, what has been experiences with the elections in PNG? Okay, firstly, it's just a case study from where I've experienced elections. I think I've experienced 4 general elections as a voter and 2 by-elections as a voter also. And we're from the Geru Stage 3A area, Commissioner, and me like come up voice blow or youth lo disla. So from that's almost 20 years in 4 general elections. So from my observation in terms of standard, where first time when I voted as a teenager, come the last general election law 2022, me looking sampla lilik something where standard it been dropped lilik. One me like outlining as an observer or a scrutineer or a voter, lo side the security. Okay, time me been teenager, me been vote security been alright lilik, cause we all sawe lo me play it inside lo disla area lo Geru Stage 3. So in terms lo side the security lo both police personnel me paluluk where disla can improve. It can improve. Also all demarcations inside lo electoral area from time voter ikisim scrutineer is on a backside, standing right behind the box, which is not right. MCN got influence lo change him tintin or threaten him or change him tintin blogam no vote. So lo demarcation side where the polling officials all stop, and then also lo side lo where voters. The timing also is one where it's been gazetted or you put in the media or some vote by start lo 8. The last election, lo 2022, we voted at 11:30, and then all time we'll talk pass him lo 7 o'clock through intimidation, where he stop him all voters lo stop him vote lo 5 o'clock. So they actually had a 5 to 6 hour time no vote, while the rest probably had a 8 hour time no disla. So some good plan or side lo Stage 3A where me plus start them lo side lo me like talk thank you lo all electoral office, especially to do with disabilities, where all scrutineers identify all disability, all talking. They advise the polling officials, and they all kiss him all go, and they vote, given the privilege to vote. Also with those with medical or recent kind of some high blood pressure or diabetes where they can't stand in line for hours, where if identified, they all go front, all some vote. So I mean, like, thank you, Lodisla. That was one of the positives where all those who had disabilities or medical grounds, they were able to cast their vote like everyone else. Okay, I think I'll go to the second. Where would you like to see PNG, see the PNG EC do move to make young people more empowered during the elections? Okay, as mentioned by Brother Charlie and his organization, awareness on individual voters their rights. So we can, time will stop, this like 16, 17, we can give awareness at schools or their or groupings will all stop youth organizations. We can give them awareness as it is their right to either vote or not to vote. So we can also do some mock elections, because it is their fundamental right. So during the mock elections, they know if the scrutineer can come and stand behind where you're going to mark your votes. So, and other things that they know that it is their right law, identify them during the voting process and counting process also. They can, one suggestion, we can kisimol youths, they can become observers. I think we have our LLG and council votes, I think in April. So that would be a good starting point to try to build towards 2027 NGE. So I think that's about it. Thank you, Stratler, Commissioner. Thank you, Stratler.
Thank you, Joseph. On behalf of Street Smart Initiative, as we heard from the Gerahu Stage 3A community. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll now move to our next speaker, Mr. Nabil Lansana. So I'll let Nabil introduce himself.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Nabil Lansana. I am a youth advocate and formerly a TIPNG legal intern. Now, I guess I'm my own organization, so I will be mainly coming forth with the conversation in the lens of youth participation in elections, emphasizing on that specifically. Now, before that, I'll just preface with a question. What is a state and what is a nation? Now, a state is the highest form of political organization, and a nation is a people that are unified by one common identity. Now, I just want us to keep that in mind as we go through the conversation. So, in terms of my experience with elections, I took part as an election observer in the TIPNG, as part of the TIPNG election observation in the 2022 NGE. Now, I observed a general apathy amongst the youths. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of young people aren't inclined to vote because they don't see any outcome coming from the political process, our democracy, quote unquote. And I can speak for myself as well because I didn't vote during the 2022 NGE. And I realized that that's because of that apathy intrinsic within the youth. Now, some statistics for the general elections in NGE, if we look at the election petitions that have gone into the elections into the past 2 years. In 2012, the 95% of the election results were challenged. In 2017, 78% of them were challenged. In 2022, 86% of them were challenged. So there's a 14% average success rate perceived amongst the political class. Now, even the political class don't agree on elections. So how do you expect the youth to even go on with a process that they don't even trust, nor their own politicians trust? So my experience as an observer, there's been a lot of talk about, awareness and education and all that. And I observed in the Gerahu section of Port Moresby, and I noticed that, to my surprise, the community was well organized. And if you contrast that with the students in UPNG, there was an election poll on the UPNG campus, and there was uproar because there was the ballots were brought late and the students were unruly. Now that just reflects that it's not about education; it's something deeper. It's our values, our integrity. Now, moving into to connect that with my recommendations to the PNG EC. One, bringing back to a nation, a common identity. I think when we bolster our civic engagement programs, and I'm aware that the PNG EC is starting to do some civic engagement programs, I wholeheartedly believe that we should incorporate cultural elements to it. PNG is naturally a communal society, but we've corrupted that community, that sense of community by, the advent of capitalism and a political process that doesn't work to our needs. And we just need to redefine what community means to us, but to enlarge it into a broader scale. Like, our community isn't just the people that will profit around us, our families, our tribe. It's the whole nation. So if we can find aspects of our cultures and different cultures throughout PNG and find the parts where it emphasizes unity and incorporate it into our civic engagement training, I think that's one way to really ground how we approach improving citizenry in PNG. And number two, leveraging technology. I worked with as an intern with the IFES during the NGE as well for 2022. So we introduced technology, tablets, but I noticed that they were introduced late. Like, we're programming the tablets during the national elections, and then it goes back to preparing for the elections ahead of time. India has a population of around 800 million. They vote all on the same day through technology. If they can do it, we can do it. I mean, it's not a monolith, but we are capable of doing it if we prepare ahead of time. So those are, for the sake of this conversation, those are my two recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabiu. And Nabiu joined our team this morning as well on a radio panel on NBC, so you can catch that recording as well on our Facebook page. We've all heard about including persons with disability in conversations, in voting, in elections. More importantly, we need to ensure that they are at the table and that they are speaking to their own challenges and they're providing solutions that we can take on. So it gives me great honor to introduce representing the PNG Assembly of Disabled Persons Youth, Ms. Hebo Davana.
My name is Hebo Davana, and I just want to say thank you for take this opportunity. Question number one, what had been your experience with an election in PNG? My answer to this question regarding election in PNG is very important to people living with disability. Why? Because it's got perspective regarding this very important event. My experience in this event is quite tense. Me sitting on my wheelchair, waiting for my turn to go forward to check if my names are on common roll. Then wheel across the church hill to cast my vote. So I would like to say it's very strategically challenging. The second question regarding where will you like to see the PNG EC do more to make young people empowered during elections. The Electoral Commission on empowering young people, young youths to engage some form of training on election-related letters, practice or hands-on knowing how to train so they will get themselves to involve in election, practice on jobs comes election times 2027. Thank you.
Thank you, Hebo, for sharing the views from on behalf of the young people of the PNG Assembly of Disabled Persons. We'll now move across the table, and we have a representative or the president of the Young Professional Women's Network, Ms. Shivani Sakme, to give her remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. As mentioned, I'm Shivani Sakme. I'm representing the PNG Young Professional Women. Okay, sure. Thank you. All right, as mentioned, I'm representing the PNG Young Professional Women Network. It's a all-females network that's established at the University of Papua New Guinea with membership of young women there. Thank you for having us. I'm here representing them. Firstly, I'd like to thank the TIPNG and the NYDA and our PNG Electoral Commissioner Deputy for being with us here, and our partners and young people in the same space as I am. So my views on the two questions. So the first question is, what has been your experience with elections in PNG? The first thing when I hear or when I think of when I hear the word elections, what pops up in my head growing up when I hear these words is fear, death, tribal fights, bribery, block votes, unlawful coercion, greed, voting, one-tax system, change of government, corruption, deprivation of rights and freedom of movement or choices. Mostly negative narratives connotes elections in PNG. My first point under the experiences covers safety and security. That's always a concern for the vulnerable population. My experience with elections in PNG has been risky and disruptive. Though I have not had the opportunity to exercise my democratic right as an eligible citizen to vote, I have my fair share of election experiences. Growing up in the Highlands region, usually the election period is a peak period where we are always on the guard for our safety 24/7, either it be going to school or just leaving the house. Safety has always been a concern because you do not know what's going to happen next. During the election period in the Highlands, schools are usually disrupted or forced to be temporarily on hold until elections are over because of the conflicts, threats, and intimidation and violence involved. Geographically, elections experiences differs as well, as shared by my projects and development director. She states that elections in PNG is a chaotic and frightening experience for her here in Port Moresby compared to her experience in East New Britain, where it's safe, so it depends on the regions and the provinces as well. Number two, there's election conflict and violence. Election conflict and violence is inevitable. Tribal fights and rivalry of election candidate supporters are imminent because of differing interests and incompatibility amongst them. Mostly political threats and intimidation occurs, and there's a prevalent physical violence, mostly a deeply rooted culturally and politically instigated that obstructs social freedom. This further spirals down to result in more serious incidents such as burning of ballot boxes, disinformation, hate speech, coercion of voting a candidate. That's because one lives in the area that a candidate is contesting for, or because you are related to this person. Usually voters are coerced to vote for a specific candidate because bribery or kisimani lo dispa candidate you should vote for him. His scrutineers will be there at the polling booth to ensure you vote for their candidate. Or if there is an issue amongst the candidate scrutineers, ballot boxes are burnt, as it has happened in a few provinces in the last election in 2022. This political violence and electoral violence are experienced in the previous elections, has always occurred in, and this intimidates and threatens many of us eligible voters to participate freely in exercising our political rights as per the constitutional provisions. Number three, inadequate awareness and information to vote for good leadership and not materialistic leadership based on wealth and position or social power. This permits misinformation and disinformation. And there's also cash flow of money during elections. The election processes in PNG can be quite a frustrating experience, as expressed by one of my executives. You want your people to vote for candidates who will bring actual change, but most of the time, people in the village don't see long term. They sell their votes for the short-term gain and in the end suffer another 5 years. In the election period in PNG, it is a time where money flows. They say if you have money, you should stand for elections. If you do not, then do not bother because people will not vote for you. Because of this, there are inadequate awareness and information on the electoral process and on how to vote. We young people do not feel the urgency and the sense of obligation as a citizen to vote because some of us have not legally registered in the electoral rolls to vote. Mostly we young people feel disempowered, threatened and intimidated to vote because of the amount of violence and security concerns surrounding the elections in PNG. Mostly we young people consider that elections are and voting for a candidate are for older people to participate, so we do not have the sense of duty to participate actively in the elections. This is basically rooted from societal constructs that deem young people to be naive and can't be listened to because they are young. Therefore, we feel disempowered to even participate, to have our voice be heard, despite being the largest portion of the population. Question 2, where would you like to see the PNG EC do more to make young people more empowered during elections? We know that our government is a democracy government, meaning that democracy means it is for the people, by the people, and of its people. Now, I have 2 recommendations, not 2, pardon me, 5. 1, conduct election awareness programs on leadership to educate and empower the communities, targeting young people on these following agendas. Enrollment awareness for eligible voters, coordinate workshops that educates on the electoral processes and the types of leadership qualities to look for in a candidate when voting, such as the youth-based training coordinated under the International Foundations for Electoral Systems, as I've been an intern with. Conduct mock voter simulation to educate and empower young people on the processes involved and how to vote. Constitutional human rights and peace mechanisms for conflict resolution and prevention on all forms of political and electoral violences. Come up with strategies and hold contextualized peace-building dialogues due to our cultural diversification to increase peace and harmony in communities. Educate young people about the voting processes so that we do not have many invalid votes. This is not only includes young people in the cities, but especially in the villages as well. Number 2, increasing participation and inclusivity in all decision-making processes on all levels. 3, ensuring young people's rights and welfare during election periods are protected and prioritized. Number 4, the PNG EC should ensure safe environment that prevents the young people's right to be exploited or suppressed and enables them to actively participate and engage in elections and empowers them to implement violence prevention measures by advocating for their own age groups as well. Number 5, in order to enable participation, prevention, engagement, and protection of young people to be empowered, the Electoral Commission must create partnerships with different stakeholders such as the police, the International Foundations for Electoral Systems, NGOs, CSOs, government departments that are responsible, etc., to enable and empower young people to take ownership of the electoral processes and peace-building processes during the election period. To conclude, the last thing you want is a disempowered and an uninformed generation for a thriving country that has 60% of its population are made up of young people. Therefore, in order to empower youths, we should look at these main key areas: participation, prevention, protection, partnerships, and disengagement and reintegration. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivani, for sharing the views of your group as well, noting that it was also a process of collecting the views of the group to share this afternoon. Thank you for sharing all of the valuable recommendations as well. We'll now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Israel Luluaki of the Youth Resource Week.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd just like to acknowledge the Deputy Commissioner, NYDA, TI, and our development partners. Thank you very much. My name is Israel, thank you. Sorry, not Israel, thank you, but Israel Uluaki. I'm the program coordinator for Youth Resource Week. Youth Resource Week basically is a program that was birthed out from Black Wednesday, the beginning of this year. We thought this year would start off really well, but it started off really bad. But it all depends on how you see it. Before anything good happens, something bad must come first. So that's my motto. That's what I believe in. So I think there's a blessing in disguise there. So basically, Youth Resource Week, the name says it all. It's a week focused and dedicated to the youths. The whole program, it seeks to provide resources and engage youth in building a life of value. The word value is so important right now. We need value. We need to bring back the values back to our youths. Trying to make a change and you're doing the same thing, you won't see a change. You need to try something different. So that's where Youth Resource Week, we're trying to do something different for our youths. We do understand 50 years for this nation has now come, the first 50 has now come to an end. We are just on the verge of entering the next 50 before we reach that massive 100. How do we start well? The last 50 wasn't so good for us youths. Let's try our best in the next 50 to make it a memorable one that will change our country, and starting first with our youths. So Youth Resource Week is a program basically about gathering like-minded people, organizations from the government, the private sector, NGO, PWDs, everybody coming together, one place, one stop, and let's provide a program and give our youths an opportunity so they can better improve their lives, because once they improve their lives, it will have a very good effect on change in our country. Okay, coming to the questions, what have been their experiences with elections in PNG? Basically, I'm of the same view as my brother here on this side, Mr. Lansana. The youths right now, a bad precedent has been set from past leaders up until now. So when you ask a youth, do you want to vote? They'll say, what will they give me? What have they done to me? What change has the last election done for me? So it's really tough for the Electoral Commission and those of us that really want change, want to bring advocacy. It's tough because we just get slapped in the face just like that. It's tough. Being a youth before, it was easy, I believe. Nowadays, for the youths, the challenges that they face, that we face, it's monumental. It's tough. It's so tough. So the environment is key. What environment are we creating so we can have a change for our youths and the nation? Basically, one question, one answer that you'd say is, we feel hopeless. There's no hope. They don't see hope in the process. They don't trust the process anymore. They don't trust us. How do we gain their trust? It's difficult. It's tough. We can see other nations, other developed nations, but we should look at ourselves and change based on our ways and our standards. Let's grow based on our ways and our standards. What are the areas that we see that we need help from outside, so be it, let's get the help. But if we can help ourselves, let's help ourselves first. Lack of opportunity is a big one. There are so many disengaged youths out there right now in our communities, disengaged. The level of dropouts in school is so high. The education system is not helping. It's tough. Social issues are on the rise. So many reports have gone out from government all around, many recommendations made, but there is no proper implementation of those recommendations. Many youths, they say, government is all over the place. They say one thing, they do another. Whenever there's a change in leadership, everything changes suddenly. So there's no consistency. Where can we trust? How can we get the youth? I want to go out and advocate to our youths, but the youths, when they come back tough on me like that, it's difficult to explain. How can I explain? I ran for elections in 2022 as a young leader. I had my experiences. It was tough. I was fighting a system. Everybody voted, but the system chose, unfortunately. There was a system that was already in place that we were fighting. So as a young person, if I'm pursuing a career in politics, it's going to be tough, young man, young lady. It'll be very tough. Lack of faith, opportunities, once again, they're just not there. This leads me to question number 2. Where they would be like to see PNG-EC do more to make young people empowered during the elections. Well, the Electoral Commission, sir, it's going to be it's going to be really tough for you at this point in time. You're not going to have it easy. The only way how I see you can be able to get some traction in this is you work through organized groups. If you go individually to spread awareness, you won't get very far. So that's why NYDA, through your networks, we need to work harder to register associations. Get the youth groups, empower the youth groups, empower the associations. That's how you can spread the message. I would suggest incentivize, you have to incentivize the work that you do with the groups. You got to engage youth, provide employment, do something, because right now the youths, they want to feel that what their effort is not wasted and they're not being used. Many of them, they feel they have been used and they've given up in life. So I'd like to just make that suggestion, just one recommendation. Just work through the networks, work together, collaborate, partner. Youth Resource Week is a great opportunity for us all, organizations here. I know you have wonderful programs that you have, so I would like to invite you all, come next year. Come there and let's see what we can offer to engage our youth so we can start the process in helping Electoral Commission, TIPNG to fight corruption and have a cleaner and a better election for 2027. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Israel, for sharing those points as well. And for those of you who is the first time you're hearing of Youth Resource Week, they do have a following on Facebook, so you can find them on Facebook. And as Israel alluded to, they will be having their event next year to mark 1 year from the 10th of January, events that transpired here in Port Moresby. So we'll move on to our next speaker, and I will invite Nelson Kokoa to speak on behalf of the Art Activism PNG.
Thank you for that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today for this important conversation. My name is Nelson Kokoa. I am the director and co-founder of a not-for-profit called Art Activism PNG, which is recently partnered with TIPNG. If you check out their Facebook page, they posted spoken word poetry of corruption, systemic corruption here in PNG. So growing up, I never really understood the importance of voting, especially in elections here in PNG. I grew up in East New Britain in the NGI region. I grew up in Keravat, which is a small town in East New Britain. And to me, when my parents came home and told me that, oh, we have elections coming up, it was just, to me, it was just another day of missing school. I never really saw the importance of voting or the importance of elections. It wasn't up until I stepped into the space of policy reform and advocacy that I really understood the importance of voting. Now, I really want to just shift your attention from my word vomit to a show that I loved growing up called Survivor. Now, on the show of Survivor, you have 20 castaways on a beach, and they have limited resources, and they basically have to survive on this island for 39 days. And each of these players have one thing in common, and they have to vote someone out in order to win the game. It wasn't up until season 40 where they introduced a new twist where a player had to choose between losing a vote to gain more power or let the power go and continue on with the game with their vote. Now, I saw a lot of players choose power and lose their vote. Now, the thing with losing their vote is during these tribal councils where they vote a player out, they're basically useless. All the conversations they have with other players will not dictate the trajectory of the game. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing here is your vote. And without your vote, you're not able to basically dictate the rest of the game. Now, when I come back to how we're going to do that as Papua New Guineans, how we're going to empower young people to realize that their one power in this democratic nation is their vote. The first one is accessible, youth-friendly civic education. Now, we heard a lot about education, but what about the people who are not as privileged as we are? What about the young people in the rural areas who cannot read or understand English? What about young people who have learning disabilities? Now, that's where we at Art Activism can step in, and we suggest the idea of developing a creative and engaging and culturally relevant programs to educate young people about the electoral processes, their voting rights, and the impact of their votes. Leveraging platforms like social media, music, and art and storytelling. All of this can help make this information relatable and easier to digest. Number two is youth engagement in policy discussions. I believe we should create forums where young people can voice their concerns and ideas. There are a lot of organizations here who are doing this at the moment. For example, The Voice Inc. Just partnering with organizations like ours that already work with young creatives and activists that can bridge the gap and bring more youth into meaningful conversations about leadership and national development. And finally, I believe the most important one that young people have been facing or were facing during the election period in 2022 was misinformation. And so the third point is combat misinformation and promote ethical voting. I believe that the PNG EC can equip young people with the tools to identify misinformation and to understand the long-term consequences of vote buying and corruption. And so with all of these 3 points, I believe that we can truly empower young people to realize that voting is not just a right, it is powerful, it is your power, and without that power, you cannot dictate or you cannot control the trajectory of the development of this nation. So thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. I think I haven't watched Survivor in a while, but that was a really good trigger. And thank you for using that as a way of sharing your views. I think storytelling is important, and I acknowledge the great work that Art Activism does. And we're very proud to be partnering with your team on several of our engagements. So thank you for that. I'll now move on to someone who is not new to the youth space, who has just returned from, I think, a speaking engagement as well, and probably requires no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. Welcome Bradley, who is here representing really the Commonwealth Students Association as the Pacific Regional Representative.
Thank you, Ariane. Hello, everyone. You guys can take my 1 minute to breathe. There's a lot of talking, so it's a privilege to be here and a pleasure as well. So I don't take for granted, and a lot of what the youth participants have said resonate with a lot of us and me as well. my name is Bradley, as introduced. I'm with the Commonwealth Students Association. 2022, the TIPNG report, I think, labeled the elections in 2022 as, what was it? Severely flawed. I think that was a nice way of saying they were atrocious. I was part of those elections. I was a presiding officer for Port Moresby Northwest as a 24-5-year-old, and got to see firsthand what the elections were like in Port Moresby. And I agree with what one of my speakers, or our speakers, have shared about the issues in PNG in terms of elections are context specific to within the region. And sometimes it seems like the higher you go in terms of altitude, the worse the elections get when it comes to issues. It's very complex. But issues that everyone in the room is, I think, well aware of. And I think a lot of young people, myself as well, sometimes forget how important elections are. It's like elections become relevant only when the elections are approaching. I think that's something that the PNG EC should note as well. It always feels relevant when the elections are approaching, and then 4 years, they're no longer relevant. But we pay for it, the decisions we make on that 1 year. I don't want to depress you all, but I'll get to it. Elections are pivotal for maintaining democracy, as we all know. And when you have flawed elections, you question the systems that are in place, right? And a lot of young people have lost hope, you know. There's a sense of despair when it comes to elections, as shared by a lot of the speakers, and I reaffirm that, and I say that's true, as a young person as well. I think one of the important things to note is, I don't have anything scripted, but I think one of the important things to note is that there's a level of political will that's actually required to push a lot of these reforms. And sometimes that feels sad because I think that's what makes it a little bit more hopeless again, because these are the very people that you're sending in through to that political process, and then they are required to change the very system that they're benefiting from. And so sometimes I feel like, well, we're sending them in, and why are they going to change the very system that they're benefiting from? So what I'm trying to get to is that when you're trying to push for change within the electoral system in PNG, I won't put a lot on the PNG EC, but it seems like that there are people that benefit from this system, the currently flawed system that we are describing. And when you try and push for those reforms, a lot of us forget that there's going to be pushback, a lot of it, when we're discussing these things. Some people are comfortable with the system that we have in place because they're benefiting from it. And they're okay, young people's voices not being represented in the room as well. And so the issue is a very serious one because people are actually fighting to maintain the status quo while we speak on change and want change to happen to the electoral reforms that we're talking about. And people a lot more qualified than me have actually gone in detail as to saying what changes need to be done. But the will to actually push that needs to be there. From within this political or the electoral commission, the political systems that are in place or the actors, and then wider stakeholders. So it's going to take everyone. I think that's important to note. And I support a lot of the contributions by Charlie and everyone who's come before me in terms of what needs to be done. And I think PNG EC knows that. You know, the major reforms structurally that are needed within administration as highlighted by TIPNG, the 3 areas, which is something we fully support, that's needed. And then another area, I think, in terms of what can be done is candidates also need to be held accountable to an extent. I don't know how that's going to happen, but there needs to be accountability for candidates as well, in PNG especially. The way they mobilize their supporters, this and that. I also note what shared by Charlie and supported fully as well. There should be a youth advisory body on the elections as well as to how we can meaningfully engage youth through the various programs that can be done in terms of advocacy or the suggestions that were shared by Siobhan, which are really good suggestions. So young people have ideas, and PNG EC needs to find a way to actually engage the young people into their process and consult them actively. I think that's it from me. I'm looking at my notes and no ideas are coming, so thank you very much for this opportunity to contribute once again.
Thank you, Bradley, and thank you for the focus really on the solutions. I think that's what's important. And what we should remind ourselves around the room is we're all partners in this, partners in our democracy, and partners of building strengthening the integrity of our country. So that's something that we can all contribute to. But thank you so much, Bradley, for sharing your views, and I think more importantly around the need for candidates to be held accountable in this process as well. I'll now move on to our second last speaker, who is the CEO of the Equal Playing Field, Ms. Jackie Joseph.
Thanks, Ariane. I think just talking about a bit about the work of Equal Playing Field, and I think I'll just get the angle of where we found the biggest leverage when it came to the election. So I think for the last decade, we've been working with boys and girls. I think we're finding some of them probably finishing off uni now, but consistently across the last decade. And we're looking at about 20,000 young people that we've reached through our schools program, which is where we've found our niche, working directly with boys and girls in the schools and working with batches of young people. And I think one of the biggest leverage we found was that we worked with these young people who have been through training, who have been big brothers and sisters to a younger cohort of young people. And they're in the most ideal place to be taking part in a lot of advocacy work. So we got behind efforts like what IFES came up with, where training young people to use technology to be advocating in the communities. And I found that that was a really big positive, because sometimes as organizations, we can just limit ourselves to, oh, we only do this work. We cannot do anything outside of that. That is not true. And I think that's some of the learning that we went through was, even if we're not directly implementing activities to help support the efforts, what existing opportunities are out there that we can help our young people be part of it? And I think that's the biggest leverage that we found was the same cohort of young people we work to be part of advocacy efforts. And so far, I think we've worked across 3 batches of young people that we've worked with, and then they've moved on to working with efforts such as IFES as well. We also found that when we're working in the schools with our teachers, the teachers reached out to us in terms of resources that they could also use for their schools as well. So that's also another thing that we've learned, that we should never underestimate our current influence within the different areas or communities that we work in. And for Equal Playing Field, that has been the schools that we work in across NCD, given that our work is at this stage centric to NCD. I think just as 2 recommendations that I'd like to share would be, we've got a lot of youth-led organizations sitting in the room that are amazing initiatives, and I think these are really ideal places to work with. Moving forward for PNG Electoral Commission, I think just echoing Nelson's words as well, saying that current organizations that are working with youth are very ideal places to work in. The second one was, as an organization that's youth-led and has a lot of young people working, we want to be we definitely want to be fully active in the space. So what are pathways that we can be able to follow, that we can keep ourselves accountable to? Are we doing enough when it comes to elections? That's basically my question. And if we're not, what are some things we could be doing, not just for any employers, but specifically for us, youth-led organizations that are working with young people, especially when we have young people at the forefront. How do we engage them, and who are the people who are the biggest influences in the room, so that that's a really great place to start as well. Dislam Tupa recommendations, Blamina, I think moving forward, we want to play an active role, and if there's more that we could do, I think a pathway will help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, for sharing those 2 key recommendations. And again, really putting the challenge back on what can youth-led initiatives or organizations do to support the Electoral Commission in the work that they have, and as mentioned, the tough road that's ahead, not just for the Electoral Commission, but for all of us that are sitting in this room as citizens of this country. Our last panelist for this roundtable before we hear from our speakers, of course, as our colleague Joseph mentioned and acknowledged, important for us was to hear the voice of the Motu Koita people, who are the traditional landowners of the land that we are on. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Henau Heni, who is the cultural ambassador for the Motu Koita Assembly, but more importantly, Ms. Hiri Hanenamo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to say thank you for having me today. Thank you, Transparency International, for having this roundtable discussion. It is very important to involve youth during elections and how to empower them. So I'll get straight to it because we have limited time given. My experience during elections, as I have participated in the last elections, I have seen that most people lack information or voter education because many of the votes that they have casted were counted as invalid because they don't know how to properly cast their votes. If they need to write numbers, they have to just put numbers or of the candidates or just write their names, but they go another way around where their votes are counted as invalid. And the roll updates that I've seen, most people who have died or who are deceased, their names are still on the list, a common roll list. And for my personal experience, my name was on the common roll list, but when I went to vote in the last election, someone has already voted under my name. So I would like to ask if there be a proper system in place for that so we can all vote under our own names. Thank you. And for the second question, how to empower youth in elections, I think most of our speakers have mentioned, but I'll just go with what I've come up with. We can do youth civic education, which is very important because when we were doing an internship with IFES, the International Foundations for Electoral System, Nabiu and Shivoni would be familiar with it. We've run done civic education for youths, and we've hosted like so many of them through. We were on the equal playing field. We've attended a youth summit, and then from them, the IFES had to get us to do internship and run civic education programs. And then under those sessions, we've run voter education, youth participations in elections, ethical leadership, election observers, social media to spread word, community mobilizations, creating voter education messages, keeping in mind that we don't have to use hate speech, and communication styles. Another one is Youth Voter Festival, where we had booths set up for where you can do slogans all around voting and elections, and we've set up a mock ballot, election ballot, where youths from all around the country, like in Port Moresby, they have to come and then learn how to cast their votes. So you start from where you check your names, get your papers, stand in line, go into the booth, all the process. We've done one of that during the Youth Voter Festival, and it was very good. We've got feedbacks from it because people were like, some of us are youths and we don't know how to cast our votes, but through this mock election ballot, we've learned a lot, and now we can all go back to our respective areas and we can cast our votes correctly. And lastly, I would say for youths is to participate in election by voting, because we can not only become observers and then sit back and complain about corruption and everything negative that's going around in the world and in our country. We can always take part by casting our vote. Because if we don't cast our votes, then we'll give the right to another person to choose who to lead us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henauheni, for closing us off with that powerful statement about the importance of all of us voting during elections. And I understand, a lot of what was expressed in the room. We heard challenges around electoral administration, whether it was with the polling stations, locations, with the electoral roll. Those issues were shared. There were issues shared around security and safety, which have become more apparent in Port Moresby particularly, and not just based on the altitude of the country. I think there was a bit shared on money politics and the impact that it has on the elections. But there was also some discussion or mention around the lack of opportunities that are out there, whether it be the lack of access to education. You look at the number of, we call them dropouts, but really the system doesn't allow for them to continue. So those challenges are there. And of course, the lack of employment opportunities for our young people. And I don't think it only affects our young people, it's affecting everyone in this country right across. So those challenges are there. But what I wanted to particularly highlight was some of the I guess recommendations that were shared, using technology to advance some of the work that we're doing, either whether it be in the awareness raising, in how we improve our electoral role or system of voting. These were some of the ideas that were shared. There was a key emphasis on partnerships, and I think throughout, I didn't realize, but on this table, we're seeing where young people are engaging. So you have a youth summit that Equal Playing Field ran, where some of them came out and became part of the IFES internship, and then in turn were able to go out and do their youth work as well. You're looking at young people from the Voice Inc. that participated in the TIPNG election observation. You're looking at different points where young people or youth-led organizations are working together, but there needs to be stronger partnership with these youth organizations so that we can create this youth advisory body and go to the Electoral Commission and say, this is the advisory body that we're putting forward to provide the advice and support that you need for the electoral, for the next elections. There was a really strong point around values and around our national identity. Who are we as Papua New Guineans? And I think it's a question we need to reflect on, not just at independence. We should be asking ourselves every day, what does it mean to be a Papua New Guinean? What does it carry to be a citizen of this country? What are my responsibilities as a citizen? And together with my other colleagues, what can I do to strengthen this country? There was talk about civic education, and the key point that one of our speakers made was on accessibility. So yes, civic education is important, but the accessibility of that education, that training opportunities that are there, we need to make sure. And I say we is really the young people in this room. You have the opportunities, you have the network, you have the engagement. So the challenge is really on you to look at those opportunities. And lastly, on the point that one of our colleagues shared about youth-led organizations. At the time that I was running a youth organization, there were not many around. And I look over 10 years later, and there's so many youth-led organizations, there's so many young people that have felt empowered to do work on behalf of young people or for young people. And that's a positive change. So while things may look bad and they might look like they're getting worse, I can positively say that a big change that has happened is we have more youth-led organizations. And so I really want to thank each of you around the table that have shared your views, shared the views of the young people that you represent, and of course some of the challenges, and really looking at this as a starting point for how we address the next halfway mark of these elections. I'll now hand it over to Mr. John Kalamoro, Deputy Electoral Commissioner, to provide the response from the PNG Electoral Commission this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Let me acknowledge my participation here through TIPNG and acknowledge Ariane Kasman, the CEO, for that invitation. I also acknowledge Adil Mansour, the Deputy Rep from the UNDP, and Dr. Hans Lambrecht, European Union, and Tessa from the Australian High Commission, and other distinguished guests. I'm listening to the different views around the table. There appears to be a lack of awareness, basically, awareness and communication from the Electoral Commission to the citizens of the country. And the translation from your presentation speaks to that. So we all need to collectively deal with it. We say election is everybody's business, so let's deal with it. We cannot sit down and say, it's your fault, it's your fault. I think we have to be more responsible as citizens, as well as an individual voter. What are the responsibilities of the Electoral Commission needs to be understood. What are your responsible duties as a voter for yourself, for your community, for the country? How do we call ourselves? And I think that whole election process needs to be well understood before we can make the changes. Now, let me, because of so many different views, let me present it another way. To start an election in Papua New Guinea, we have boundaries, okay? Boundaries in terms of provinces, in terms of open electorates, in terms of local government areas, in terms of wards. So those are defined by law. Unfortunately, the law that we administer as the input to the electoral roll is not administered by the Electoral Commission. The ward proclamation process is a separate organic law that sits with DPLGA. So they provide Electoral Commission a list of wards in which to conduct elections. So the Electoral Commission then prepares the electoral roll according to that list. Now, if that list is wrong, or is not updated, or is not gazetted, of course, the obvious person to blame is the Electoral Commission. I'm simply following a law to print the rolls as per the ward list. Having said that, it is our obligation to go out and conduct awareness on how can you as a voter be on the roll. Now, there is a natural barrier here. How do we connect with everyone in the country, every household in the country? How do we connect to them? So we need partnerships. So in the provinces, we acknowledge the support from the provincial administration who in turn take us down to the LLG manager, who in turn take us down to the ward recorder or the village book recorder, whatever you want to call him, or her for that matter. And these are the people we rely on to compile the roll. So I'm here in Port Moresby waiting for that information to come to me. How well that is done in the field is a matter of how well we've trained our field staff. Coming to the point of youth group, youth organization. Yes, the law does allow for the returning officer to engage groups, like your groups. So the law is there allowing for that participation in the electoral process. So there is no restriction by law for you to approach the provincial election manager in your province. But must be too small a place for all of us to focus on. Or send me talk play. But approach the election manager in your province and get yourself registered. So we can then work with you through the provincial administration arrangement that we now have in place. So that's within the provinces where you can actually participate. Now, at the national level, we have the Interdepartmental Election Committee, where the CEO for TIPNG and PNGEC sit on to look at the overall national coordination. And this opportunity here, I think, is a good one, in that feedback can come through and we could communicate that to the people who matter, who can make decisions. Now, it is unfortunate that funding for this sort of arrangement is always not there. So I'm not going to apologize to you for this. It's not a shortcoming I have created. It is something that we have to live with, this issue of no funding to the Electoral Commission to do massive awareness campaigns. So even if we engaged you, how will you go out, even with your technology? But reflect now while you're working on it. Is it a solution? Let me pose it like that. Is technology right now a solution for Papua New Guinea? You've heard stories about India. Yes, I went twice to India to witness the elections there. The technology they have is developed specifically for India, with over 1 billion voters. So yes, India can boast they've invested into the technology and they can sustain it. We don't even have money for awareness. The census hasn't been completed either. There's no money to pay the workers, so all Hollywood paper blog man salobuse. So what I'm telling you, is it a problem or is it a solution? Or should we close our eyes and walk away? It's there. let's make the best we can within our own means. Or should we be looking at other simpler processes and systems that we can employ? For example, we have a pilot exercise that's running right now in one of the Motu Koita villages, Tatana Araira Ward. My director of operations is here, who has been able to go into the ward and dissect the ward by the clans and get the clans to enroll themselves at the very lowest level, confirmed by a ward enrollment committee, and we are there now to attach a photo to the face of a voter. I know it sounds too simplistic for most of you sophisticated people here. Is that the way forward? Can it be sustained? There were 4 people in the whole of Motu Koita who tried to enroll twice. We were able to detect them. We didn't prosecute them. It's too early for that. But these are solutions, and most of you have kind of alluded to solutions in a crisis. We know the government is talking about NID. NID has been here since 2014. This is 2024. How many years have gone by? On the roll, we have just under 6 million voters. They have captured about 2 million over the last, since 2014. Now, will they be ready for us come 2027? I leave you to your own imagination on this point. What I'm trying to say is the elections have to be conducted. Next year we are having the 2025 LLG election. They need a role. We cannot wait for the NID to happen in 2027. It may not be there for us. DPLGA has spoken about the village book. They've done one complete province that I know of, and that's New Ireland. They've collected very good data, but that's the extent of the coverage of Papua New Guinea. Who's going to help us do the role? Next year we are also having by-elections. By-elections also require an up-to-date role. Where will we get it from? And that's one of the driving reasons for the Electoral Commission to to try to construct a role for elections. And there were comments as well about funding over the 5 years rather than 6 months before the election, which would be the ideal way to plan. And that was one of the strongest recommendations from the Special Parliamentary Committee established in 2022. They did a wonderful report. 70 recommendations, believe it or not. Comprehensive. They even grilled me in the Parliament House. And now I don't know where that report is. No one is implementing it. The opening remarks by Ariane, and it will answer, respond to most of the queries about security in elections. Within the election law, you have the Election Advisory Committee to address issues of whether the elections are being run properly or not. And that committee has never been active in all the elections that have the membership of that committee also is an issue. Some members have conflict of interest because of the office they hold. So the committee has not been able to fully function. But the reform talks about having 3 or 5 commissioners who could be appointed to be there for an election and who could respond to all the things that could go wrong or could go right within an election. Now, I'm not sure how far that has gone, but it's still in the law that there should be an election advisory committee. In other countries, they have that arrangement. They have a board of commissioners who address election issues during an election event. And so it doesn't look like it's a one-man decision, especially in this country when you have this special circumstances application of the law to declare an electorate or to fail one. So it's a big, responsibility to be placed on one person. So whether the change is desirable or not is still to be seen and made effective. But let me say, there is a lot of room to help each other, the youth especially. And I know someone here quoted a figure of 60% of the youth, of the population is youth. No, that's a massive number. Are they all on the roll? I don't think so. Disinterest? Who cares? What do I get out of it? It's the opinion of youths. But how do we meaningfully engage with them? You tell me, let's look for ways to get everybody enrolled. It's a huge chunk of population that's not on the roll yet. And enrollment is not about being on the roll to vote, there is also a provision in law. If you are 17 before an election, get yourself enrolled. So there is time for youths to get onto the roll. But I'm pretty sure a lot of us do not know that. Because, again, we haven't done, a good campaign on getting people to know their rights to be a voter. I agree with you. I agree with you that we are not doing enough awareness. The voter turnout in this country is quite low as well. National average is about 60%. So what's happening? In the old public service, people are member of PSA. They used to say, no free riders. Now there are a lot of free riders. By choice, or by simply saying, who cares anymore about. But I think you can change it. So yes, Electoral Commission does value your contribution, and we'll work with you anytime you want to engage. But don't get stressed out that you may have to do most of this work on your own. How you source your funds, you may have to do it on your own, but we can provide you the materials. And we've done that already with many of the bigger agencies, TI International and Caritas and the others. We've engaged with them. We are seeking assistance from other countries in terms of, video training. A lot of you here may be offering that sort of service. So come forward and let's engage. Yes, thank you. I'll leave it here for the moment. That's a lot of information I just gave you. But feel free to, through the chair, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Kalamoro. I think Mr. Kalamoro points out a really important point that all of us need to be aware of, and that's the importance of ensuring that we keep ourselves informed. And the first place to start is the legislation, the organic law on national and local level government elections, knowing what the law says so that we can communicate better and we understand the processes that are there. And as Mr. Kalamoro has mentioned, there is opportunity to reach out and partner with his team to ensure that we are all working together with the same messaging as we raise awareness for some of the issues that need to be addressed. And I think as Mr. Kalamor also alluded to, it's not just the issues we're discussing, there's also other parts, other discussions that are happening outside of the elections that will affect the elections. And so that's an important point for us to also remember or keep in mind. So I thank Mr. Kalamoro for sharing those views with us as well. In closing the dialogue, the official dialogue, I will invite a response also from the National Youth Development Authority. I welcome David Lawrence.
Since this is an official event, I acknowledge the leaders past, present, and aspiring of the people of the Motuan and Koitabu, the custodians, the indigenous custodians of the land we meet, dignitaries from development partners, our Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Kalamoro, Ms. Ariane Kasman, Executive Director of the Transparency International, and our contributors, the most important people in the room, which is the young people. I acknowledge your presence and thank you for your contributions. All your recommendations are welcomed, and we, from the National Youth Development Authority, take note of that. I, on behalf of the National Youth Development Authority, would also like to extend our thanks to all the participating organizations and individuals in this dialogue. First of all, let me just start off with giving context of what the National Youth Development Authority is before jumping straight into the responses. The National Youth Development Authority is a government agency which is responsible for youth development in the country. And we are backed by the legislation called the National Youth Development Authority Act 2014. We are not direct implementers of youth programs and initiatives, but we are the coordinators of implementing the National Youth Policy. If you don't know that we have a National Youth Policy, we currently have one that's existing from 2020 to 2030. And our main functions are on just not the custodians of youth development, apart from coordinating the implementation of the youth policy. We are also mandated to establish a strong network, which is the youth councils, which start from the local level to the district and to the province. So I'd like to say that the energy in this room and the responses that we've received are facts, and somewhat the contributions that you bring to the table are of value and important. Not because that you are young, but because you make up 60% of the population in this country, referred to as the youth bulge in many forums, or as what the experts say. And just by definition of youth in the country, the Act under Section 63 defines youth as young people between the ages of 12 to 38. That's quite interesting. However, when the National Youth Development Authority had submitted the policy, there was a directive from the National Executive Council that asked the National Youth Development Authority to redefine youth between the ages of 12 to 30. Which has now come down to reduce to a cohort that we can now work closely with. Sometimes we set benchmarks that are over-ambitious, and then we don't deliver. And so I guess in this process, we are learning of how to navigate the youth development space and do things correctly. And as we speak, currently the National Youth Development Authority he is holding the National Validation Workshop at the APEC House of the reviewing of the National Youth Development Authority Act. So any of the provisions or changes that any organizations want to do, please do contact the authority through its, you can check us on Facebook, or you can directly reach out to Transparency International and they can do a referral to us. So let me just quickly touch on a few recommendations, important recommendations that were raised. I note the recommendations from the Chamber of Commerce, one on voter education, which is essential. Number two is the youth participation and the recommendation about the Youth Advisory Council. Again, in every business, government business, we always consult the legislation and the policies to guide the operation of how we operate and carry on with government business. So I think we just have to find the legislative leeway to find that mandate of the specific function of how that Youth Advisory Council would act in the election process, which I do welcome. But perhaps maybe we can look at it from what the Deputy Commissioner has made mention of, which is the Election Advisory Committee. And we don't know the composition of the Election Advisory Committee. So perhaps maybe we can park that with the Electoral Commission. And the National Youth Development Authority welcomes that if there is a time where we can get to sit down and see how we can have young people involved in that process. I also note the recommendation from Youth Resource Week, which is on the youth registration. And yes, the National Youth Development Authority has been doing exercise in that. We've been registering youth groups and youth organizations. We will soon launch the portal of the online registration, which is too early to announce, but I just wanted to, for the sake of this dialogue, to make sure that that's one thing that's in the pipeline and gives hope that, yes, there is a process that we can access and make sure that these recommendations are not just being heard at this forum, but there is follow-up action that will eventuate. Also, the recommendations from Equal Playing Field, which I really love about the collective efforts in the youth space. The National Youth Development Authority is also preparing for the National Youth Forum, which will be held next year. And we will also have a partners and stakeholders dialogue. And we encourage youth-led organizations that are working with young people to register and to work closely with us for this forum. And that could be, and we can connect you to the Youth Coalition that we can then work closely with. Because we've seen that there is a huge gap between what the CSOs are doing and what government is doing in terms of delivering services and programs for and initiatives for young people. One thing that's really not been talked about is also the accountability of NGOs and CSOs. I know there is a fight for space in grants, being grant recipients and programs and interventions, but then who holds the CSOs accountable is one thing that no one questions. So again, this is also a call out, a call to action to CSOs and organizations out there. We also have to hold each other accountable. I want to make 10 commitments on behalf of the National Youth Development Authority, and these are not new, but before I do that, I'd also like to call upon the Electoral Commission with the improvements that needed in the Youth Common Role updates. I also would like to extend our support that if in the event that the Electoral Commission needs the National Youth Development Authority, we can do that through the Youth Council network that we already have. We can utilize the 22 districts that we've already set up, 86 local youth development councils, and 800 plus wards. It's not the entire coverage of Papua New Guinea, but it's somewhere that we can start, and that can be the light that we can see at the end of the tunnel. Progressive work. So sometimes we may think that we want immediate change to happen right now, but let's use the Pareto rule. With the 20% of resources and efforts that we have right now, what can we draw together from in order to see an 80% impact of our collected efforts? Now, the National Youth Development Authority will continue to commit to establishing youth councils in the districts and LLGs. And as per the National Youth Policy, our second commitment is to collaborate with the Transparency International in establishing the 22 chapters of the Youth Against Corruption associations that could work closely with, that we can rely on as a network to implement voter and civic education programs and initiatives. Our third commitment under policy number 4, which is to work with Integrity of Political Parties and Candidates Commission to encourage youth wings in the political parties that have been established. Because very often young people think that our role is only to vote, but why not run for the elections? Our commitment number 4 is to commit to encouraging young people in election observations and consultations, which National Youth Development Authority facilitates during election periods. So for those of you who don't know, NIDA, through my section, International Relations, we were responsible to deploy the Commonwealth Observer Group all throughout the country, and we facilitated the consultations which included youth, women, and other indigenous and excluded and marginalized groups. Our 5th commitment is to collaborate for civic engagement and voter education. So again, this is open to youth organizations. Let's not work in silos or independently, but how can we come together as a collective to come up with programs that can counter election violence, voter rights and responsibility. One of the examples I can share is with the Commonwealth Youth Council, which a program that we rolled out in Kenya and in the Caribbean called Vote Like a Boss, meaning that if young people want to complain, you don't have the right to complain unless you vote. So this kind of programs where young people's energy and creativity is harnessed and included in that process. Not only that, but we can also look at initiatives that can also encourage young people to run, such as Not Too Young to Run, which is one of those engaging programs which came out from Africa. So again, we can also look at initiatives that challenge gender norms and cultural norms in terms of youth and elections. So this is some of the creative ways that we can look outside of just the elections, but the preparations of that, of how young people can be involved. Our 6th commitment, which I've made mention, we are already doing that, which is the reviewing the acts. We've also found out that with the youth councils, in decision making, so let me just quickly explain on the youth councils before I go on to the last 4. The youth councils are an independent body which is must not be politically interfered and must not entertain bureaucratic red tapes. And through those youth councils, that's where your youth voices, you make decisions and you work closely with government officials and other parties, partners and stakeholders. However, we also found out that we wanted to have the chairperson of the District Youth Council to sit on the board of the DDA board and also the LLG assemblies. But our biggest challenge is the organic law on district, provincial and local level governments. So again, when we are in this process of reviewing this act, we are also consulting CLRC and DPLLG to make sure that there are provisions made in their legislation to allow for young people to sit in these decision-making processes so that young people can make decisions on budgets, policies, and legislative changes. So again, let's look at decision-making not only at elections, but we can also utilize the youth councils. So moving on to commitment number 7 is that NIDA also supports young people to do public inquiries. So for example, if it's an election inquiry, if you're able to do that, we can facilitate that with you. For example, with the GBV inquiries, the National Youth Development Authority collaborated with UNFPA and rallied youth organizations who work around GBV to make submissions to the public inquiry. So that's how you can hold government accountable. The 8th, this is for the Electoral Commission. I may sit here as the Principal Advisor for International Relations, but under my role, I am also the Ministry focal point to the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Secretariat of the Pacific Community, which is SPC. So the Commonwealth Observer Group report was published and presented by the outgoing Secretary General, Honorable Patricia Scotland, who came to Papua New Guinea and submitted those recommendations to the government of Papua New Guinea. Under my section, We are going to closely track those recommendations, and we will be reaching out to government organizations, especially the youth component of what has been done on those recommendations put forward by the Observer Group as a government agency undertaking that responsibility. The ninth is on the commitment to support education and governance, policy and legislation processes, and we'd like to do that through our policy section. And again, we've currently signed an MOU, recently signed an MOU with the Voice Inc. So we're looking at initiatives that we can then implement, and also extend that invitation with that we will be going into partnership with TIPNG, as I have mentioned, on the YACA chapters to be established. And the last commitment, which is the 10th, is on safeguarding of youth during elections and post-elections. So when we're talking about safeguarding, we're strongly emphasizing on youth exploitation and tokenism. Like, for example, during elections, you can be exploited by candidates to hold their posters, campaign for them, but then you lose the right to vote and have no time to actually go to cast your vote. After when a candidate wins and becomes a parliamentarian, are you prioritized on their list of things to deliver in the next 5 years? So these are some of the things that we'd like to emphasize. And youth tokenism is very real. You can be invited to a space where you can be used, your voice can be used, but then in the long run, there is no sustainability of your engagement and actual investment of the initiatives that you are carrying out. So these are the 10 commitments from the National Youth Development Authority that I'd like to emphasize on, which we are already doing, but I feel like in this dialogue more people need to know. Again, coming back to our Deputy Commissioner's remarks about there's so much that we've said about, but maybe some of these things we will have to do on our own. But I would like to encourage everybody else that we have to link arms. We are as strong as how we form allies, and together we can mobilize to work closely together. 10 years ago, Ariane and myself were just youth representatives sitting where you are on the other side of the table. Post 10 years, we are now making decisions and strategically positioned to influence positive change in this country. I'd like to be this as that mirror to you young people as well, that let's co-create and share that space while we coexist. And together we can do that, because if not now, then when? I thank you all.
Thank you, David. Thank you for sharing those 10 commitments on behalf of NYDA. I think there was a lot to think about in the points that were shared. I know that the challenge has been put back on the young people, and as David alluded to, I think 10 years ago we had the same challenges put to us. The difference was we were in a table at the corner, not being able to speak. So these opportunities to speak and to advance things are important. I think the key question on everyone's mind is where to now? And so I want to start by first of all thanking each and every one of you for sharing your views. This is not just going to be something we're doing to commemorate International Anti-Corruption Day and to forget about it. It is really the starting point for how we engage young people in these elections, in the awareness that we plan to do, and of course the work to strengthen the integrity of the elections. In terms of next steps, we will have an outcome statement that will be published in the newspapers on Wednesday to reflect some of the discussions today, as well as some of the commitments that were made. We will have a full outcome document outlining everyone's views that were expressed, some of the recommendations that have been made. And what I am proposing is that around this table, we set up a technical working group that can now look at the discussions, look at the recommendations, and work with a particular branch within PNG-EC that TIPNG works closely with. And that's the Information and Communication Awareness Branch, or ICAB, as most of us know it. They have a lot of resources. They already have training materials. A lot of the materials for PNG-EC are also on CDs, so you can easily pick that up from their office as well. They have a wealth of information, so it's on us to also obtain that information. And as TIPNG, we remain committed to helping to share that information. So if there is an organization that's unsure about any of the things that were discussed today, please do reach out. We will share information, including information on the Electoral Advisory Committee that was referenced. The Electoral Advisory Committee is a specific committee that's been that's set up in legislation. For those that are not aware, it is made up of three appointees. One appointed by TIPNG, one appointed by the Ombudsman Commission, and I think the third a member of the legal fraternity. And it's only set up, its only role is to provide recommendations on whether a electorate should be failed or not. And as Mr. Kalamoro mentioned, that's a very difficult decision to make, to fail an election, to fail an electorate. That's not a decision that comes easy. And as Mr. Kalamoro also alluded to, in the role that I play, I also get an opportunity to observe at the IDEC meetings, which is where all the government agencies come together to discuss how the elections are going, what the preparations have been like. And that is also not an easy table to sit at. So there are many challenges ahead. But what I would like to do from this is to create a table for young people and look at how we can link up better with the Electoral Commission, particularly, as I mentioned, with the ICAB, but also on some of the points that David raised, which are important. The Integrity of Political Parties and Candidates Commission last month released their corporate plan that will take us into 2027. PNG Electoral Commission also have a corporate plan that takes us to 2027. And so if you don't have a copy, important to also get a hold of them and find out what they're doing, what they plan to do, and how we can engage in those processes. TIPNG again remain committed to ensuring that we are strengthening the electoral integrity of this country, and we welcome partners to work with. I really want to thank Mr. Kalamoro for joining us this afternoon. It is a busy time for Electoral Commission with the work that they're doing out at Tatana, so I also acknowledge Margaret Vagi for her presence today. We know it's not easy to update the role because we ourselves are also unsure about how to do that. I'm sure if I asked you at the start if you know where to go and enroll, I don't know how many of you will know. And if you don't have that information, then the first question you need to ask yourself is where you can get that information, so that you know what form are you supposed to fill in, because you shouldn't just be turning up and expecting to be given. You must know Form 11 is the form you need to fill in. You must understand also what the rules are around or guidelines are around registering to vote as well. And that information, I hope that we can all work together as part of a technical working group so that the messaging is consistent both with PNG Electoral Commission and with all of us before we disseminate the information. And the reason why TIPNG see PNG EC as a key partner during the elections is because they are the mandated body that administer the elections. In the laws of our country, they are the only body that can run the elections in PNG. And so in order for us to be engaged in that process, we must partner with them. And I make special mention and acknowledgement of ICAB under the leadership of Director Alice and her team. who have always ensured that they are providing information and support to TIPNG. And of course, we now will open that pathway for all other youth organizations and community organizations to join in those efforts. Again, as I mentioned from the start, this is the halfway mark. We know that there were challenges. We know that not much has been done. And, Mr. Kalamoro asked a question. We had a great report. It was tabled in Parliament last year in December, the Special Parliamentary Committee on the National General Elections 2022. Report tabled in December 2023. No debate. And as of this sitting, no debate on it. It's on the notice paper, but it has not been debated. So we go 1 year again without any discussion around what was tabled in Parliament. Question again for you is how you ensure that that gets debated and discussed on the floor of Parliament so that it can be implemented. As Mr. Kalamoro mentioned, 70 recommendations are on there. And it's important that all of us are aware because of the consultation that took place, not just here in Port Moresby, out in the 4 regions. All citizens, as much as possible, were given an opportunity to contribute to that. If you need a copy, please reach out. It is on the TIPNG website as well, so we're happy to share that. And I say this because we were part of the technical working committee that assisted the parliamentary committee to finalize this report to be presented on the floor of Parliament. There are many reform processes taking place as well, so it's important that you keep yourself aware. What is the role of IDEC? What is the role of the Electoral Commission? What is the role of the Integrity of Political Parties Candidates Commission? And I think the key point that our 2 speakers pointed out was the role of Department of Provincial and Local Level Government Affairs as well, as I see that as the key agency that links NYDA to the work that it's doing, but also the key agency that does work with the PNG Electoral Commission. Again, in closing, I thank each and every one of you for your views that were expressed as well as your recommendations. They will all be documented, and we will ensure that we share that with you all, make sure that you are comfortable before we widely circulate to our partners and our donors that were in the room today. But again, I thank our invited guests that have joined us. I thank each and every one of you at the table today. And I thank all the people that have joined us online as well for this session. Please join me again in giving a round of applause to everyone in this table. I thank you all again. It brings us to the end of this roundtable dialogue, and the aim would be that in the next 12 months, we should be able to provide a progressive update on the commitments that were made today. So again, thank you everyone, and we look forward to working with you all.